Good evening, everyone. We are continuing our pilgrimage with Jesus. We have now brought him to the point where he was arrested and the cross was placed on his shoulder, so we're in the final dramatic chapters of this extraordinary life. So let's begin with a prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, beloved Master Paramahansa Yogananda, saints of all religions, dearest friend, Swami Kriyananda, humbly we bow to you all. Help us to feel your living presence as you expressed through Jesus. Help us to feel the courage and the joy that moved him step by step through the great drama of his incarnation, that we, countless generations now and to come, can be always uplifted by the power of his divine consciousness. Help us to receive him, that the realization that he had may be received also by us. Om. Peace. Amen. I'd like to start this evening with Swami Kriyananda chanting, Mother, I give you my soul call. This is from a kirtan many, many years ago at Ananda village.
Mother, I give thee my soul, God. You can't remain hidden anymore. Give my mother a soul, God. She can't remain hidden anymore. Come out of the silent sky, come out of the mountain glen. Come out of the silent sky, come out of the mountain glen. Come out of my secret soul, come out of my secret soul. Come out of my cave of silence, come out of my cave of silence. Mother, I give thee my soul, God. You can't remain hidden anymore. Give my mother a soul, God. She can't remain hidden anymore. Come out of the silent sky, come out of the mountain glen. Come out of the silent sky, come out of the mountain glen. Come out of my secret soul, come out of my secret soul. Come out of my cave of silence, come out of my cave of silence. Come out of the silent sky, come out of the mountain glen. Come out of the silent sky, come out of the mountain glen. Come out of my secret soul, come out of my secret soul. Come out of my cave of silence, come out of my cave of silence. Mother, I give thee my soul, God. You can't remain hidden anymore. Give my mother a soul, God. She can't remain hidden anymore. give thee my soul, soul, soul call. You can't remain hidden anymore. You can't remain hidden anymore.
It's only a recording of Swamiji, but I wanted to say thank you, Swamiji. That was just lovely. It must have been a studio kirtan because the singing was too exact, but it was a lovely piece. All right, here's where we are, my friends. Last week, okay, let me get this straight in my mind. What we're going to do now, in order to take us to the point where Jesus is placed in the tomb. Last week we left where the cross was placed on his shoulder. He was condemned. He was tortured a bit by Pilate. He was whipped. And now he starts this walk from the place where the cross is placed on his shoulder up to the hill, which is called Golgotha, where he was crucified and then taken just a short ways down the hill and placed into a cave. That's sort of the trajectory of life we're working with now. And that cycle of time over the course of many centuries, and I believe I mentioned this last week, the tradition is that it was a Mother Mary, the mother of Jesus, who continually reenacted that saga as a way, as an act of devotion for her to keep her consciousness close to Jesus. And she made little shrines. This is what the tradition is. She made little shrines. She even actually paced out some of the distances to be the same distances that he walked. These are from the more esoteric sources, not at all from the gospel, from the accepted gospels of the New Testament, but from alternate gospels, from Edgar Cayce, and from other such traditions. And it came to be called the Stations of the Cross. And there were actually, sometimes there's more, but in the one that I'm following, there's, I think, 14 of them, 12 or 14. And the walk that he took was called the Via Dolorosa, the way of sorrow. Now, from a worldly perspective, meaning from an external perspective, it certainly looked like the way of sorrow because of all the suffering that, led up to it, and it culminated in his crucifixion. From the perspective of Jesus himself, Swamiji is often, and Master have often emphasized, that Jesus was completely triumphant over the ways of this world. And for us to take that whole walk as the way of sorrow is to really miss what Jesus was doing. He was sacrificing his physical body, that was true. And in that sacrifice, he was drawing in a lot of the karma of his disciples, and that is where the tradition comes that Jesus died for our sins and that we are saved because Jesus sacrificed himself. It's a true principle of Sanatana Dharma that the Guru can use his physical body to absorb the negative karmic energy of his disciples. And it is true that shortly after Jesus died, on the day of Pentecost, the disciples were uplifted in the Om and greatly transformed. And it is understood by those who speak of it from a more yogic point of view that in fact the Master, the death of Jesus greatly uplifted his disciples because it wiped away a great deal of their karma. The correction that needs to be put into that is that once that physical body was sacrificed, when the life force was taken out of it, that physical body as a vehicle for working out karma was done. So it wasn't like the physical crucifixion of Jesus sort of paid it forward for every disciple thereafter. But the principle is still true, that the Guru has the capacity to absorb into himself the karma of his disciples. And among many of the reasons why the masters are able to transform us and change our consciousness is because by a secret yogic technique, they can take our karma and greatly accelerate our spiritual evolution. So, because this whole series of classes that we've been giving all these months have been an attempt to recreate in some way the experience we would have if we were all in Israel together and were able to walk through all these holy places. So with pictures and with verbal descriptions, I've been trying to sort of say what this would be about. So the Via Dolorosa, the walk from where he was condemned to where he was crucified and laid in the tomb, is not a very long walk, a couple of kilometers through. Right now, it's right through the city of Jerusalem, as Jerusalem is now. You walk up the small streets and there's merchants and restaurants and life is going on all around you. At the time that Jesus did this, he walked from the edge of the city outside of town, and where he was crucified was just outside of town. It wasn't far, but it wasn't in the city proper, as the city has been built around it. So, as pilgrims, if one is resident in Jerusalem, which I had the great joy of being resident for 3 or 4 weeks at a stretch a little more than a year ago, you go to a certain point, and then you walk to where he was condemned, and then you walk every place that he went, and then there's these certain historically recognized. Now, none of this is in the Bible. The Gospels that are included in the Gospel don't include many of the original incidents. Once the cross is put on Jesus, everything else is tradition. That's not true. Two of the incidences that are stations of the cross, when he meets the women devotees of Jerusalem, and when this man named Simon is pressed into service to help Jesus carry the cross. There's a paragraph in the New Testament referring to each of those. The others, which was what we'll go through, is the tradition that has lived on since the time of Christ. So what I'm going to do now is that I'm going to start showing you a couple of pictures that we saw at the end of our last session, but now I'm going to say, okay, now we are walking as pilgrims in Jerusalem now, and this is how we would go through this experience. And I'll illustrate some of those also with the classical paintings and so on, as we've done. But the city of Jerusalem, the way of the cross, as it's also called, the way of the cross, the stations of the cross, the Via Dolorosa, all these are the same names. All of them are marked with a round piece of iron with a Roman numeral. And they all have some really beautiful little sculpture that describes what's happening there. Unfortunately, no one who was with me took good photographs of all of them, but I'll show you as many as I can. And when we would walk this, just so you'll understand, because it's right through the middle of town, when we would walk, we would start like at 5 in the morning, so that all the shops were shuttered and there were not a lot of people on the street. So you could go from place to place and really feel and experience what each one had to offer. So, without further explanation, we'll start with pictures, and I'll just tell the story as we look at the places. Some people who have some of the systems that have prayers for how Jesus goes through this have prayers emphasizing how he suffered. The Franciscans have prayers that emphasize the beautiful qualities that Jesus was expressing in each place. I'm not going to use anybody's prayers, but it was so interesting to me just to see how both options are possible. So traditionally, the Via Dolorosa starts at what is called the Lion's Gate in the outer walls of Jerusalem. So here's just simply in 3 languages to give you an idea of Israel in modern: English, Arabic, and Hebrew. These are the 3 languages that exist in Jerusalem. So now let's look at the next picture. We are walking into the old city of Jerusalem through this gate in the wall called the Lion's Gate. If we were, the road that we're coming up, if we walked down that road just the length of a long city block, if we turned right and walked for a distance of about 2 blocks, we would be outside the city walls and we would be at the Garden of Gethsemane. So to walk from the Garden of Gethsemane into the city here is a very short distance. And that's what we're looking at. So this is called the Lion's Gate. Come closer in the second picture. Just because you see the carving of the little animals there above it. Some people think they're lions, some think they're leopards. These are the kind of controversies that scholars and historians love. Let's go in closer. That's the picture of what is said to be a lion. And it's called the Lion's Gate entirely and only because of these carvings. There's no other meaning that I've been able to find. So let's go inside now. This is the gateway to a Franciscan monastery, and we see the sculpture on the right. When you have time, you can look at it more closely because these are all recordings. And what you see is Pontius Pilate sitting in a chair. You see Jesus with his wrist bound in front of him. This is the scene where Pilate condemned Jesus, and the little circle under it with the 1. This is how you begin to find these. This is about a 1-minute walk inside the Lion's Gate. Let's go another step inside. And this we saw last week. As soon as you come in the gate and you look to the right, this chapel is called the Chapel of Flagellation. And these are the stories that we went through in detail last time in front of Pontius Pilate, where Jesus was humiliated and abused. And then Pontius Pilate condemned him to death. And stepping inside, let's take the next picture. This again we saw last week is the little chapel, which is inside the walls there. And we'll go one more step in. And what is the most beautiful part of this? The stained glass windows depict the pictures of him being arrested. But what looks so much like the spiritual eye at the top, or at least replicates the shape and feeling of it, is actually a crown of thorns. And in just a really beautiful way, if you think about it, do you know, what is day to the worldly man is night to the yogi. And what is night to the worldly man is day to the yogi. So Jesus was experiencing what everyone in ordinary terms would think of the darkest night that you could imagine. To be arrested, to be unfairly convicted, to be physically mistreated, to be humiliated, to be condemned to death on no basis whatsoever, when his entire intention was to give love and to uplift, to be rejected by the very people he'd come to help. It's really hard to make a story that's worse than this one. But Jesus knew he was born for this moment. For this hour was I born. And he also knew the tremendous power for good that would be activated by his absolute surrender to the will of God, and the strange turning where everything that the ordinary mind would think of as dark, the divine was going to turn to light. And so if we, because this is the first and the second station, Jesus is condemned, is the first station of the cross, and Jesus is asked to pick up his cross and walk to his own execution. And so if we take that, what that represents, you know, so often in our lives we come with our own positive intention. We believe that this is how it's going to work out. And it doesn't work out that way at all. And not only is a fate we didn't choose imposed upon us, but we're asked to carry the cross ourselves. Not only are we condemned, but we have to cooperate with our own condemnation. I leave it to each one to feel how subtly sometimes that takes place. But Jesus said, if they strike you on the right cheek, turn to them the left also. If they ask of you your coat, give them your cloak also. When they came to arrest him in the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus didn't hide from what he knew was coming. Who do you seek? And when they said, we are seeking the one called Jesus, Jesus said, I am he, and he stepped into his destiny. And that's what the first and the second station of the cross is, to give us the courage when God sends a challenge, that instead of shirking from it, we step into it. So this beautiful ceiling, which looks like a beautiful piece of art, it looks graceful, it looks expansive, and only if you're standing very close to it do you realize that the circle is made of thorns. And this is the great paradox of life, isn't it? So while we contemplate this first and second station of the cross, let's listen to Swamiji singing Master's chant, listen, listen, listen.
Listen, listen, listen to my heart song. Listen, listen, listen to my heart song. I will never forget thee. I will never forsake thee. I will never forget thee. I will never forsake thee. Listen, listen, listen to my heart song. Listen, listen, listen to my heart song. I will never forget thee. I will never forsake thee. I will never forget thee. I will never forsake thee. Listen, listen, listen to my heart song. Listen, listen, listen to my heart song. I will never forget thee. I will never forsake thee. I will never forget thee. I will never forsake thee. Listen, listen, listen to my heart song. Listen, listen, listen to my heart song. I will never forget thee. I will never forsake thee. I will never forget thee. I will never forsake thee. Listen, listen, listen to my heart song. Listen, listen, listen to my heart song. I will never forget thee. I will never forsake thee. I will never forget thee. I will never forsake thee. Listen, listen, listen to my heart song. Listen, listen, listen to my heart song. I will never forget thee. I will never forsake thee. I will never forget thee. I will never forsake thee. Listen, listen, listen to my heart song. Listen, listen, listen to my heart song. I will never forget thee. I will never forsake thee. I will never forget thee. I will never forsake thee. Listen, listen, listen to my heart song. Listen, listen, listen to my heart song. Listen, listen, listen to my heart song. Listen, listen, listen to my heart song.
This is the beginning now of the Via Dolorosa. We come, if we were there physically, we would come out of that little chapel. We would just walk that very short distance. We would come back out onto that gate. You would turn right. You start walking up the hill, not very far distance. And in the course of Jesus walking, carrying his cross, in the tradition of those who were following him. Now, how many of his disciples were there? What were they doing? who was crowded on the street. Now, bear in mind, I have to say that more properly, because they weren't walking through the city, they were walking out of the city. And 3 times on the Via Dolorosa, the cross is too much for Jesus and he falls. So you have that image, and the third station of the cross is when Jesus falls for the first time. And it's just, he's exhausted from being up all night, from being beaten, from having the crown of thorns pressed on his head, from everything that you can imagine. And the cross is a big, heavy piece of wood. And he's having to drag that, and he simply stumbles and he falls. And of course, the image is obvious, which is all of us, no matter how powerful our intentions. There's, at times, it's simply more than we can do. Whether or not it's the physical body that fails, the spirit that fails, the heart that fails. There's just times when our movement forward becomes impossible. And I've certainly seen in my years of the spiritual path, watching myself and having been privileged to have many friends. We've all traversed this path together. There are many times when it really is just too heavy and we just fall. Now, there's a difference between giving up and falling. And of course, what happens in the life of Jesus is that he doesn't die on the street. He doesn't, he finds it within himself to be able to stand up and keep walking. What we have illustrated by that aspect of Jesus's journey at this point is that he's fully entered into the human reality. And the human reality is variable. And we have to, what determines our success on the path is not, as they say, and it's a cliche, but it's the truth, not how many times we fall, but the fact that we get up simply one more time. Just one more time. Can I go just a little bit farther? So in contemplating the first fall of Jesus, that's what we have to ask. Okay, I have to stop. I have to draw from within myself every ounce of faith and hope that I have. And then I have to find a way to go forward. Now, that's the third station of the cross is the first time that he falls. And right in the same place, the tradition is that Jesus met his mother. Jesus meets his mother. Now, here she is, she's, it depends on what traditions you read. I was looking at Master's commentary on the Bible, and he actually refers to Mary very little. And I don't know why. If Swamiji were here, I would ask him why Master didn't write more about Mary, but he doesn't. But in many other beautiful traditions, Mary is almost like Jesus' partner in all of this. One of the things that Master does say in his commentary is that he confirms that Jesus was born by the power of the Holy Ghost, that his conception was divine and not human. Master just states that explicitly. He says that an advanced soul can do that, and that Jesus did that. And therefore Mary also was of the consciousness that such a thing was possible. So now one can only imagine sort of what it was like when these two great souls meet. Now, on one hand, you can think about the natural sorrow of a mother, a perfect mother, seeing the son that she birthed and raised suffering, so it must have torn her heart out. Master says that even great souls actually, they experience human life as we experience it, but they also simultaneously see the divine perspective. What exactly that means, I couldn't say. But you have this extraordinary power of when Jesus and Mary come together. There's something after when we get to the end of the story, after Jesus has died, been resurrected, and ascended. We're going to come back and talk about Mary because she lived 20 years after, and there's several places in Jerusalem that are very sacred to her presence, but they all have to do with the time after Jesus' incarnation. So I'll talk more about her then, but also in this context, Mary has been exceedingly active in the world over the last 200 years that we know about. She appeared to the peasant in Guadalupe. She appeared to the children in Portugal at Fatima. She appeared recently to the children of Medjugorje. She appeared in Rwanda, and just countless places where Mary keeps coming back. And Mary keeps coming back in many of these, most recently in the last 150 years. She's talking about the dangerous direction of civilization as a whole, and how by our devotion and by our prayers we can help mitigate the negative karma that's being put in place by mankind's collective bad actions. In Rwanda, she appeared 12 years before the genocide that took place there, and she warned the people that unless they turned to God, and she said specifically, the rivers would run with blood, which in fact they did during that genocide. But bringing so much light also in certain ways must have saved. There's a very, very wonderful book called Left to Tell, which is about a woman who survived that genocide under very challenging conditions. And that same woman wrote about these apparitions of the Virgin Mary. She was raised in a very devout household. And how the power of devotion to the Virgin Mary gave the people tremendous courage. I'm going to just tell the story, which is really quite far outside what we're doing, but it's in my mind and I want to share it. This woman, Ilibagiza, I can't remember her first name right at the moment, but when she was writing about the apparitions of Mary in Rwanda, and she came to some schoolgirls there, and her father was extremely devoted to that image of Mary, and the family often went to be there when Mary was appearing to the girls. So it was a very deep part of it, and she was of the people that were massacred. And everyone in her family but one brother was killed. That brother was out of the country, and her father insisted that she run and hide. But here's the part of it. Her mother was a teacher, and her father, I believe, was the principal of a school. They were very prominent people, and they were leaders, spiritual leaders, and leaders in every way to the people in their town. And when the genocide began, it was announced on the radio, and it was perpetrated by government agents, by people who had political power. And she and all of her people were the targets. And when it was beginning, all of her group, all of her tribe, went to the stadium of the school where her mother and father played such a prominent role. And there were 10,000 people gathered there. And the father was on the loudspeaker system talking to everyone. And they didn't know what was going to happen, but they were all gathered together because they were terrified. And he said, if this is a few renegades, he said, we can fight them off. But if this is backed by the government, as it appeared to be, he said, we're all going to die. So instead of what he did at that point, he said, if this is going to be our last hour on the earth, he said, how do we want to die? And, do we want to die with love in our hearts? Do we want to make peace with everyone with whom we've had a disagreement? This could be our last hour. How do we want to die? And then what happened in that huge stadium is that people began to embrace each other, to forgive each other, to make peace, to apologize, to make amends. And her father ordered her to leave that stadium and to go hide with a friend of theirs who was not of that tribe. She absolutely refused to go. He absolutely ordered her, and she'd never in her life disobeyed her father. So she went and she hid. And as a result, she didn't die, but everybody else there died. But the story, which is the prequel to the famous book she wrote, Left to Tell, is how her father had the strength at such a moment to be able to stand there with so much courage. And it was about Mary and the power that Mary put into those who would receive it. When I was in Israel, especially when I was leading the pilgrimages upon which this is based and was really feeling the power of the place so deeply, it came to me that how much, at least speaking for myself, that this whole story is about Jesus, but the power of it, a great deal of the power of it, comes through Mary, the living power of Mary. In Swamiji's life, in the very last year or two of his life, he took a pilgrimage to Medjugorje. And Medjugorje is where the most modern place that Mary appeared and has been appearing for the last 30 years and still appears to these visionaries who were children when it started, but are now, grown-up people with children of their own. And not all of them, but some of them, still receive regular visitations of Mother Mary. And Swami deeply wanted to go and visit that place. As he put it, he visits every place where Divine Mother has appeared. And he had an opportunity to meet a couple of the visionaries. Vishka was the one that he felt the closest to. And I've said this earlier, I believe, when I've talked, and even in this class series, and I wrote about this in Lightbearer, the biography I wrote about Swami. He said to her, he asked her the next time she saw Divine Mother to say on behalf of Swami, I've tried to serve you in every way I can think of, but if there's more that I could do, please tell me. And he never got an outward answer from the visionary. But Swamiji said he felt the answer inside his heart. And I think Divine Mother's answer would have been, you've done everything that you can. So we have the moment when Jesus meets Mary. And let me think how to say this. I've been in circumstances with Swamiji where, where what other people thought was happening was different than what was happening. And that there would be one or more of us who understood more what was going on, and there would be this very profound, intuitive conversation. So when I think, and just from that tiny little perception that I myself have had, I think of Jesus meeting Mary and him and the two of them completely understanding in a way that perhaps none or few of the others could understand exactly what he's doing, why he's doing it, and what his consciousness is in that moment. And how she, far from thinking about her own suffering, sometimes people would imagine how Mary suffered when she saw her son suffering. But if Mary suffered, she would be pulling Jesus' consciousness down. She would be demanding of him that he relate to her sorrow. And it's hard to imagine, given her spiritual magnitude, that she would behave that way. I had several unfortunate incidences with Swami, unfortunate from my side, in which he was striving to keep his word and fulfill a duty that he had assigned himself that was yet going to take tremendous willpower. And out of sympathy for him, I tried to dissuade him. I tried to dissuade him from continuing to force himself. I wanted him to rest. And on one such occasion, he said to me, "Get thee behind me, Satan." He said, "I've set my will to this, and it doesn't help that you're trying to break my will." And I was mortified, of course, that I would be so. I said, "So I'm fighting on the wrong side." And his response, Swami's response to me was, "Yes, and I don't appreciate it." Meaning, if you're going to be my friend, you have to stand in my reality and give me strength to go forward in what I've set my mind to. So it's impossible to imagine that Mary, who was closer to Jesus than anyone she would have had to have been, was in any way concerned about herself or would have expressed anything that would have diminished Jesus' ability to go forward. So it's not the way it's usually talked about, but that's the way that as yogis and as self-realizationists, we need to understand it. And the way we, again, apply this to our own lives is, do we have the strength to help others succeed at the heroic task of God realization? Or do we become faint-hearted when we see them striving, as I did with Swami? And instead of strengthening their will in the name of something, we try to weaken it. And even with our own selves, how do we respond? What do we, of what stuff are we made? Let me think for a moment. There was another thought here. I can't pull it forward. So now let's look at the pictures that are related to the third and fourth station of the cross. So this is, we've walked about four or 5 minutes from where we were. You can see the dark circle. There's 2 of them here because this is the third and fourth station of the cross. The third, and the carving above the door there, which we'll look at a little closer, is a representation of Jesus falling. And on the right side is when Jesus meets his mother. Unfortunately, the sculpture is a little small, but that's what you're looking at there. Let's take the next picture. It's a little closer. This is the third station of the cross, when the burden of it becomes too heavy and Jesus stumbles to the ground. So let's take the next. And we can see a little bit of Jesus meeting his mother, but not as much as I would like. Just imagine the scene, just the chaos of it, and the sheer physicality of it all. And there's a guard, of course, forcing Jesus to keep going and holding back the crowds from rescuing him. So let's take the next picture. And this is this is just a painting of Jesus falling for the first time. Okay, let's go one more. This is another rendition of Jesus falling, and you see the legion of angels that is walking with him on this. What this picture beautifully represents, it's just someone's artistic idea, is really the 2 levels. I mean, Christ, his body looks tortured and strained, but where was his consciousness when all of this was happening? There's a story in Master's life when he was installing the concrete wishing well at Mount Washington, which is just a feature in the garden there. And the concrete wishing well weighed, 1,000 pounds or something like that. It was exceedingly heavy. And it fell on his foot, and it hurt his foot very badly. And Master then, for the disciples there, said, I'll do a demonstration for you. And he said, now my awareness is in my body. And his consciousness, his face was distorted with pain, and he couldn't even stand on his foot. Now, he said, I'll lift my awareness to the superconscious. And his face became completely relaxed, and he walked as if his foot wasn't injured. I don't know how to integrate all these different realities, except that Master said, if the avatar did not enter fully into the human experience, it would be no example to humankind. So Master said the avatar enters into it completely, but at the same time, inwardly knows he's always free. I have no way of describing it more than that, except this picture seems to show it. But also look that the angels are weeping for the tragedy that mankind is acting out here. So let's look at the next picture. This is this is the fourth where he meets Mary, and so this is, again, a sculptor, a rendition of Jesus meeting his mother. And imagine the power that passed between the two of them at such a moment. Now let's go inside. Oh, here we are looking again at that one a little bit more. Let's go inside now. There's a chapel built here where Jesus meets his mother, and that statue in there is actually really quite beautiful, and it captures a great deal of the feeling of everything that I've been saying, and for generations people have been venerating this spot where this happened. Let's go now to another painting. Now we have different artists' ideas of Jesus and his mother. You know, you always have this irony when a woman has given birth to a man and the man grows to man size, but her consciousness of him is always from the beginning. Let's move to the next one. Here we have the guards being more sympathetic and allowing him to speak to her. This is all just after he stumbled, bear in mind. Let's see another. This is beautiful. She kneels before him. Let's see the next. These are paintings by a Spanish painter named Murillo, two of them, just two different pictures of Jesus meeting his mother that are very sweet to me. And then here's one more by the same artist. Different angle. So while we look at this last picture of Jesus meeting his mother, Swamiji will sing to us, Engrossed is the bee of my mind.
mormona bramora Shama podda nilkomole Modloje mormona bramora Shama podda nilkomole Kali podda nilkomole Shama podda nilkomole Kali podda nilkomole Shama podda nilkomole Engrossed is the bee of my mind On the blue lotus feet of my divine mother Engrossed is the bee of my mind On the blue lotus feet of my divine mother Divine mother, 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 my divine mother Engrossed is the bee of my mind On the blue lotus feet of my divine mother Engrossed is the bee of my mind On the blue lotus feet of my divine mother Divine mother, 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 my Divine Mother, Divine Mother, my Divine Mother, Divine Mother, my Divine Mother. Engrossed is the bee of my mind on the blue lotus feet of my Divine Mother. Engrossed is the bee of my mind on the blue lotus feet of my Divine Mother. Divine Mother, my Divine Mother, Divine Mother, my Divine Mother, Divine Mother, my Divine Mother, Divine Mother, my Divine Mother. Engrossed is the bee of my mind on the blue lotus feet of my Divine Mother. Engrossed is the bee of my mind on the blue lotus feet of my Divine Mother. Divine Mother, my Divine Mother, 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 Divine Mother, my Divine Mother. Engrossed is the bee of my mind on the blue lotus feet of my Divine Mother. Engrossed is the bee of my mind on the blue lotus feet of my Divine Mother. Divine Mother, my Divine Mother, Divine Mother, my Divine Mother, Divine Mother, my Divine Mother, Divine Mother, my Divine Mother. Mojloje mormona bhramora Kali podani komole. Mojloje mormona bhramora Shama podani komole. Kali podani komole. Shama podani komole. Kali podani komole. Shama podani komole.
So that is stations number 3 and 4. So now we come to one of the sections that is talked about in the Bible. Let's see where, yes, get this correctly. Where a certain man named Simon helps Jesus to carry his cross. And this is what the Bible says about it. A certain man from Cyrene, Simon, the father of Alexander and Rufus, was passing by on his way in from the country, and they forced him to carry the cross. And they brought Jesus to the place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. I have often, because I've stood in that spot, and we'll stand there in just a moment. The way it's described is the guards pressed Simon into service. Now, how did it happen? He happened to be coming in from the country. He happened to look like a strong and capable man. Jesus had fallen and met his mother. The guards took sympathy on Jesus, or they simply wanted to get the job done and knew that it was going to take Jesus too long if he had to drag the cross himself. And so all of a sudden, this man is called into service. Now, Jesus falls 2 more times. So either Simon wasn't carrying the whole cross, or even without having to carry the cross himself, Jesus still stumbles. But to me, standing in the place where Jesus was pressed in, where Simon was pressed into service, I mean, one can draw countless inspirational ideas from it, not the least of which is when the divine asks you to serve, to carry your part of his mission, how will we respond? Do we have to be forced into service, or will we eagerly, do our part? One of the realities that disciples have to think about, disciples of Jesus, disciples of the divine, however we call ourselves, which is, how can I serve? We try to characterize the divine, and God gives us these examples of what it looks like to be dedicated, so that we can understand what's being asked of us. When I myself first came to Ananda, I had a very Vedantic attitude, is the way I would put it. And what that means is I was very intellectually convinced that this world was a dream, and that I had never wanted to make anything happen in this world. Let me think about it differently. I wanted to make a meaningful contribution in life, but I never found anything that I believed in enough. I had a job for a short period of time, pretty much before I met Swami. And this would have been like 1968 or something like that. And computers were a long ways away, but people were beginning to understand that they could mechanize certain mundane tasks. And there was some kind of a machine that was a combination of a typewriter and a printer, and it was very useful for legal documents. And I had a job in a law firm where my job was to work that machine, and I had my own little office, and people would bring me their documents, and one way or another I would do it. It was a long time ago, so the details escape me, but it was the beginning of the freedom that the word processing computer gave us. And I had that job. It was a very good company. It was a very good job. It had a very good reputation. And I had a 90-day probationary period. And I knew I was doing good work. It wasn't hard and all these other things. And on the 90th day, I intended to go in and ask for a raise. And on the 90th day, the personnel director called me in and fired me. And at the time, I didn't quite understand. She explained it to me because she didn't use these words, but I finally got the right words. She fired me because I didn't give a damn. That was just it. And it was a very good company, and they wanted people there who had some commitment to what they were doing. But I didn't believe in what they were doing. I was just there for the money. I didn't believe in any part of it. So I carried a little bit of that attitude with me when I went to Ananda. When I moved to Ananda, now it was fueled by this sort of Vedantic idea that this world is just a dream anyway. And I was there to learn from Swami, to grow spiritually, to help others to grow, but I wasn't very integrated. And Swamiji was working day and night to make this community of Ananda a success. And I was working too, but I still didn't care on a certain level. And I remember being in the car with Swamiji once, and he was still driving himself in those days, and I was in the back seat. We were driving through the dirt roads of Ananda Village. At that time, they were dirt roads. And I was looking out the window, and I was realizing that every single thing I was looking at had been created by the blood, sweat, and tears of a lot of people, most especially Swami Kriyananda. And he was pouring every ounce of his life force into making this community a success. And as it did fortunately many times over my years with Swami, it occurred to me that I was the one who was out of step. Because I thought I was being so spiritual by being aloof, by not really committing myself to holding myself superior to the things of this world. But here is this man whose consciousness I wish to emulate. And I realized I had to pay attention to what he was doing. Because Swami always answered the call, how can I serve? How can I serve? How can I serve? Just the story I told earlier where he asks the visionary, tell Divine Mother I've done everything I could think of to serve her, but if there's anything more I could do for her, please, let me know what that can be. Make it clear to me so that I can also do that. So here's Simon, and here's Jesus, and this is a frightening situation. Did Simon resist? Did he have to be forced? The Bible is silent. Or did he see in the moment what was being offered to him? Not asked of him, but offered to him, which is an extraordinary moment to serve in a way that unprecedented, unique in all of history. So Simon helped Jesus to carry the cross. And ever after, that's been the image, Let us be like Simon. And what it means to help Jesus carry the cross is to take up whatever task the divine assigns to us, and with everything we have, give our whole selves to that service. So that is the part of Simon, which is the fifth station of the cross, when the guards press Simon into service and he helps Jesus carry the burden. Isn't that just beautiful when you say it like that? He helps Jesus carry the burden. We help the saints, we help the masters carry the work of bringing divine consciousness to others. That's the way we behave like Simon did. Now there's another tradition which is not mentioned in these Gospels, but has been held for centuries to be true, that there was a woman who loved Jesus, whose name was Veronica, who was dedicated. Jesus had many deeply dedicated women followers, and she was along the roadway and saw Jesus struggling, but was so overcome with compassion for him that without regard for her own safety, without regard for the fact that the armed guards were there, that Jesus had been condemned, that there was a fierce and rowdy mob following them, just everything about it was, and Jesus himself was, was afflicted and had been already abused, had fallen, was struggling, but she couldn't bear it, and she rushed out to him, and with the scarf that she was wearing, she wiped the blood and the sweat off of his face, like that. Just an act of pure, loving kindness to the source of her divine inspiration. And the tradition is that the face of Jesus was imprinted on the scarf. And it's a relic that somebody has somewhere where you can see, I presume it still exists, where you can see the face of Jesus. So once again, we have exactly the same question. When the divine comes in front of us and asks something of us that is not glamorous, that may in fact be terrifying to us. Not necessarily terrifying in the same sense of risking our physical lives, but terrifying to us because we don't know the consequences. We don't know what's going to happen. Are we able, as Veronica was able, to see only one reality, which is the face of the Lord, and the Lord needed to be comforted. And Veronica stepped forward and with her own scarf just, took what she could of the suffering off his face. And as a consequence, the very cloth that she used to do it was blessed with his imprint. So now let's look at some pictures of the places where these incidents took place and some artist renditions of what that was like. So this is the fifth station. This is just the place in Jerusalem, the Via Dolorosa, where Simon was pressed into service. And now let's look at another picture, which is, this is from a whole set of stations of the cross. I actually believe these are on the wall of the Church of the Beatitudes, if I'm not mistaken. And so we see Simon, who is strong, who lifts up the long end of the cross and then walks with Jesus and helps him the rest of the way. Here's another picture of Simon helping. And this one, I love this one because Simon looks so kind, but so capable. I don't like the way Jesus looks, but maybe he's got the cross on his back, and maybe that's why he's bent over. But it isn't only that Simon picks up the cross, but he reaches back his hand to also pull the Lord upward with him. Now, let's go to the next picture. This is actually a stone that's on the wall right at this spot. And this is said to be an ancient paving stone that was actually on the ground, and that Jesus was struggling, so his hand fell to the ground, and he pulled himself along by pressing his hand into the stone. And there's an indentation in the stone, and you see the color is different because thousands and thousands of pilgrims walk up to this spot, put their hand on the rock where Jesus' hand was when he was making his way at the place where Simon stopped to help him. Some of the people on our pilgrimage trip, more than one, felt an electric shock go through them when they put their hands on this stone. Master said that wherever a person of realization has lived, wherever divine events have transpired, that divine vibration remains forever. That's what Master said. So, and Master said about all these places in Jerusalem, the phrase he used was almost all of them are authentic. And he specifically mentioned a few. I don't know this one specifically, but almost all. The room of the Last Supper was not, but almost all of them were. So let us presume this is also. Then let's go to the next. This is the spot where Veronica stepped forward to help Jesus. And you see again, it's the sixth station of the cross, and you see a sculpture there with the woman coming out to hand him the cloth. And then we have a painting. Again, here's Veronica. Simon is still helping. Veronica comes forward, and you can see this artist's rendition. She's wiped the face of Jesus, and his face remains on her scarf. And then there's one more painting of the same, where the scarf has become a holy relic. And while we just contemplate this artist's picture of this moment, I chose one of Swami's small songs, which is called Cherish These. And it seemed that what we're looking here is an act of divine friendship, an act of perfect love. And there's this beautiful, sweet song that Swami wrote about what is really important in life. So let's listen to that.
Sei in un angolo del mondo, c'è la purezza, umiltà, vero amore, onestà. Fermati lì, null'altro ha valore. Is there anywhere on earth perfect freedom, sorrow's death, selfless friendship, blameless birth, cherish these? Not else has worth. Sei in un angolo del mondo,
c'è la purezza, umiltà, vero amore, onestà, fermati lì, null'altro avallo. Is there anywhere on earth perfect freedom, sorrow's death, selfless friendship, blameless birth, cherished these, naught else has worth. Sei in un angolo del mondo, c'è la purezza, umiltà, vero amore, onestà, fermati lì, null'altro avallo. Sei in un angolo del mondo, c'è la purezza, umiltà, vero amore, onestà, fermati lì, null'altro avallo. Is there anywhere on earth perfect freedom, sorrow's death, selfless friendship, blameless birth, cherish these, naught else has worth. Sei in un angolo del mondo, c'è la purezza, umiltà, vero amore, onestà, fermati lì, null'altro avallo. Is there anywhere on earth perfect freedom, sorrow's death, selfless friendship, blameless birth, cherish these, naught else has worth. Sei in un angolo del mondo, c'è la purezza, umiltà, vero amore, onestà, fermati lì, null'altro avallo.
It's very interesting to hear that melody just in that context. You hear the words, and if you don't speak Italian, you lose what the words are because it goes into another language and you just hear it as sound, which is sometimes very helpful because in almost all of Swami's music, all of it except one exception I'll explain, Swami said he always got the melodies first. The only exception to that was when he wrote The Life of Christ, the oratorio. When he first wrote it, he had a spoken narrative between the different songs. But after living with that for a while, Swami decided that the spoken word and the music, having to go back and forth between spoken word and melody, it was different parts of your brain, and he didn't think it was conducive. So he decided to write what he called the recitatives, which is he took those biblical transitions of explaining the story, and he wrote and he set them to music. And he said in that case he had to start with the lyrics, and then he put melodies on it. And of course, when he wrote melodies for Shakespeare songs, he already had the words. But he said, with those exceptions, and I guess John Anderson, he put words, he put melody to an existing poem, having said the caveat first. Otherwise, Swami would receive the melody first, and then later, or maybe or afterwards, whether it was later or not, then he would either write the words or the words would come to him. But the communication was always first with the melody. And so in that particular song, you know, the words are very lovely and very touching, but what really comes through in that melody is just, I don't know, at least to me, which is why I put it there, is just the poignancy of human life, of just how tenderly we can care for each other, and we don't. That's why the words say, is there anywhere on earth perfect friendship, sorrow's dearth? Cherish that. Wherever you find that, cherish that, because that's not really what the experience of the world is. And the melody, but it's not a sad melody at all. It's a very joyful melody, but it's not exuberant. It's just very deep. And when I think of Veronica, and when I think of Simon, because at that point in the story, when we don't know who Veronica is, we don't know who Simon was. It's not like Peter, the first of the disciples, or John, who wrote the gospel in the book of Revelation, just where we have this big picture, or Mother Mary herself. We just have Veronica and Simon. And Simon is the father of Alexander and Rufus. But so they're just, they break through the dualistic confusion of this world and are drawn into this extraordinary moment in the life of Christ, and give to him and cherish this opportunity. Every time Divine Mother asks something of us, I'm thinking in this context of Mother Teresa of Calcutta, who I just in a documentary film I saw, and she did all this work with the poorest of the poor and people who were dying in the street. And there was a picture of her, and she's sort of picking up, embracing close to her body this maggot-infested beggar who's dying in the street, and she's taking him in, and there's no part of her that hesitates. And in that context, either at the moment or later, she says to the person following her with the camera, you know, you're wondering how I can do this. She said, you see the face of a dying beggar. She says, I see the face of Christ. And so how would you hesitate even for a moment to embrace and to lift your guru if you had the opportunity to do it? And you would simply do it. But her vision of reality had shifted so that she saw something completely else. And Simon stepped into that, and Veronica stepped into that. And their example and our meditation on those stations of the cross is, when you call me, Lord, give me the strength and the courage to respond as they responded. So we'll do one more station of the cross before we stop, and this again is Jesus falls for the second time. And let's assume, you know, that Mary was the one who began to reenact this experience, and she wanted to step through every phase of it with him, to relive it, to help him to find in herself the strength to be lost in admiration, to draw from each experience the divine example. Nothing happens in the life of a great one except that it's destined by God. So here, Simon has come to help him. Veronica has come to help him. Those who love Jesus are giving him all this strength, but still, again, despite all of this, the flesh is not capable, the body is not capable, and he falls again. And so the same story. We think, well, I fall once and then I recover and now everything is fine. No, up to the very last, in the most heroic moment, it's the wave comes and the wave goes, and always the power in the hand of God is moving through you. So let's look now at just a few pictures that we're walking the Via Dolorosa, and now we're going to come to the what is the 7th station of the cross, and look at the place where Jesus fell for the second time. And now a chapel has been built on this place to commemorate it. There's the circle, which has the number, the Roman numeral 7, and then one can walk inside this small chapel. Let's go inside. And there's an artist's rendition of Jesus bent over. When you step into these stone rooms, of course, stone itself endures, and so the whole atmosphere of it is the unchanging power. It's symbolized by the stone, but the real unchanging power is the power of God through Jesus and those who love him. Let's go outside again here. This is, again, this is not the way I've walked it, because I didn't walk it in the daytime. But if you come into modern Jerusalem at this time, you just walk through, and now you can see a little bit of the sculpture. That's the doorway to the chapel we just went into. This is, the modern world has just moved into the middle of this. But Master said, wherever a great master has been, their consciousness is present forever. So think about how many levels of reality exist simultaneously in that spot. Let's go in one more time. On the wall is this. This is the sculpture that marks the place. It's on the other side of the doorway. We can look at it more closely. And there's also a sculpture on the wall. Yes, that's right. So can we come closer to that sculpture? My records are not accurate here. See the carving in the stone? And there's Latin words that are there. I don't know if we have one more picture. Do one more picture. Yes, there it is. Okay, this was carved centuries after Jesus, but there's Latin words. And the Latin words, basically, they say, Jesus Christ victorious. And I think how often we sing Jai Sita Jai Ram, Krishna Krishna Jai Jai, and Jai means victory, then Sanskrit, but there's the word. The victory of the power of divine love over all the limitations of the world, and that was the message of Christ. That's the next picture. With this picture, we'll listen to Swamiji singing Master's beautiful chant, "Receive me on thy lap, O Mother, cast me not at death's door. Receive me on thy lap, O Mother, cast me not at death's door." And that'll be the close for our evening today.
Kole tule nema kali, kaler kole dishna pele. Kole tule nema kali, kaler kole dishna pele. Receive me on thy lap, O Mother, cast me not at death's door. Receive me on thy lap, O Mother, cast me not at death's door. Receive me on thy lap, O Mother, cast me not at death's door. Mojloje mormona bhramora, kali poddo nil komole, kali poddo nil komole, shama poddo nil komole, kali poddo nil komole, shama poddo nil komole. tule nema kali, kaler kole dishnapele. Receive me on thy lap, O Mother, cast me not at death's door. Receive me on thy lap, O Mother, cast me not at death's door. Receive me on thy lap, O Mother, cast me not at death's door. Ojloje mormona ভ্রমরা, কালী পদ্ম নীল কমলে, কালী পদ্ম নীল কমলে, শ্যামা পদ্ম নীল কমলে, কালী পদ্ম নীল কমলে, শ্যামা পদ্ম নীল কমলে। কোলে তুলে নেমা কালী, কালের কোলে দিস না ফেলে। কোলে তুলে নেমা কালী, কালের কোলে দিস না ফেলে। Receive me on thy lap, O Mother, cast me not at death's door. Receive me on thy lap, O Mother, cast me not at death's door. Receive me on thy lap, O Mother, cast me not at death's door. Ojloje mormona ভ্রমরা, কালী পদ্ম নীল কমলে, কালী পদ্ম নীল কমলে,